Auburn is not a place, it is a people. The loveliest village on the plains is more than a college sports venue, more than a university filled with historic buildings, more than a quaint little southern town. Its worth lies within its people, those that call Auburn home, whether that be for a single day at a time or for a lifetime. Much like our legendary Toomer's oak trees, our stories are the product of a firm foundation laid in the beginning of our Auburn story. These are the stories of the Auburn family. These are their roots.
War Eagle Auburn fans, and welcome back to Auburn Roots. Our journey of exploring and sharing the Auburn stories of your Auburn family members continues here in episode number 12. We are making our way into the top 20 now. Got a new guest here, and I'm very pleased to have him here. Now, we have some interesting connections. We love the connection train here on Auburn Roots. I met this gentleman when I got to hang out with Dee Ford on one of her few pilgrimages she is taken here to the loveliest village on the plains. And also, I've gotten to know him through his time on a certain radio show in the Auburn area. So that's kind of where my connection goes with my guest, Mr. Rich Perkins. Rich, how you doing?
Kyle, I'm doing great, man. I'm just really excited that I cracked the top 20. That's pretty impressive. I don't know that I am worthy of the top 20 of anything, but happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Well, let me tell you this. So you come on recommendation from several people, but two that are significant to you, which I've already mentioned, that being Dee Ford. She was number 1. And then Jeremy Henderson was number 2. So you're 12, 1 and 2. I honestly didn't plan it this way, Rich, but it happened. I don't know if this is serendipity or what.
It's apropos that I should be 10 behind Jeremy. That's appropriate, and I know it'll make him happy. So that's good.
And as a reminder, listeners, if you do want to go check out those episodes, as I said, episode 1 was Dee Ford, episode 2 was Jeremy Henderson. You can go back because I'm sure we'll be talking about those two individuals throughout Rich's Auburn story tonight. So, Rich, I like to just lay back on the couch and talk to me about where your Auburn story begins. Was it at birth? You were handed a basketball or a football that was orange and blue, or was it one of those things you were walking down the street and saw a sign about Auburn University? How does your connection begin with the Auburn story?
Well, Kyle, I think my story is not unlike a lot of other Auburn people in that it has familial roots. My parents both went to Auburn. My dad was the first in his family to attend college, and he grew up in Birmingham and entered Auburn University in 1955. My mom was right behind him in 1956. He graduated in 1959, and so that's kind of the impetus of my connection. My father sadly passed at a very early age when I was just shy of my 4th birthday. And so growing up, all of the things that I had of his, all of the kind of connections, the accoutrement, the little trinkets, almost all of them had something to do with his time at Auburn, whether it was his fraternity pen or it was the Glomeratas. There are a couple of Glomeratas. His major doesn't exist anymore, but he was in a major. He got a degree in what's called business art. He was a bit of an artist, and so there is one Glomerata, I believe, his junior year, which would have been, I guess, the 1958 Glomerata, where he actually there are some of his black and white sketchings that are the beginnings of different sections. And so growing up, when I was a very young child of 6, 7, 8 years old, and I was trying to kind of discover who my father was, what I had were these things of his from Auburn, his gloms, his fraternity pin, I had an Auburn baseball cap that had been his for years. And so in my mind, the two became inseparable. It was, in my mind, my father and Auburn were kind of one and the same. And so, and I grew up in Birmingham, and then at about 11 moved to Atlanta with my mother and my stepfather, and really did not, unlike a lot of Auburn fans, I didn't grow up as an Auburn sports fan. So in other words, we didn't go to football games. We didn't really follow Auburn that much. It just wasn't a part of kind of our culture. And but it was always that aspect and that allegiance was always there for me. And so when I got out of high school, I went into the Navy, and I was in the Navy for 4 years. And when I got out of the Navy, the only place that I had any interest at all in going was Auburn, and that was 100% because of my father, and because of the tie that I had there. One of the few pictures that I have of my parents is, I guess they had been married about a year, and my father is in his cap and gown. My mother is pregnant with my oldest sister, who's 9 years older than I am, and they are standing in front of, and Kyle, you'll probably know exactly where this is. There is a white brick house right next to what used to be the Mama Goldbergs on Thatch.
Mm-hmm.
There's a white brick house, and that used to not be painted white. It was a red brick, and I have a picture of them standing in front of that house for basically a graduation photo, with my mother pregnant with my oldest sister and my dad in his cap and gown. And so those types of physical embodiments, if you will, mm-hmm. those kind of very tangible reminders that he was there and that we kind of walked the same place. We chewed some of the same dirt, if you will. That's my Auburn tie. That's what made me an Auburn fan.
See, in our first few minutes here, you've, I think, already established what I think is so unique about the Auburn experience, or the whole of the Auburn experience, as David Housel would call it. Yeah, this is about sports mainly. That's the bread and butter of what this is. That's kind of what drives the engine. But the car doesn't go without the rest of the parts. You can have an engine, but if you don't have wheels to move that engine forward, it doesn't go anywhere. And I think that's what's the perfect imagery of Auburn here, is because you've got these ties with your father, but it's not necessarily sports. It's as simple as this one little building where you've got this picture of where the legacy starts in some sense, and that you can trace it back to and it's still there. Now, I would venture to say your dad probably would have a few things to say about how much Auburn has changed, especially in the last couple of years. It feels like every day a new condo goes up.
You're not wrong. And I will tell you, speaking of physical places, I have some of the letters that, back in the 50s, you wrote letters instead of making phone calls or email or whatever. And I have some letters that he very faithfully wrote to my grandparents, and a couple that he wrote to my mother before she graduated from high school and came to Auburn. And the address, I've tried to locate that address, and that address doesn't exist anymore, because it is basically, that address used to exist on, and I forget the name of it now, but the street that runs between Anders Bookstore and whatever that club, the bar is.
It used to be Sky Bar. It used to, or no, it's Sky Bar. Yeah, that's what it is.
Sky Bar now, yeah. So that street that runs right there used to not be there, and he lived in an apartment that was right there. But you're right. So much has changed, and I think that's one of the reasons why. And not to go off in a rabbit hole, but when the whole Tumors Oak debacle happened, and those trees were destroyed, that was a really painful episode for me, because I know that was one of kind of the few places that was still around, that was around when he was there. Now,
Yeah.
they didn't roll the oaks back then like we do now. That wasn't a thing, but they were these kind of central points to the entrance of campus. And speaking with my mother, I know that was still a place that people congregated and gathered, and they had big, spirit rallies and pep rallies and things like that, down there near the Oaks. And so when those were poisoned and died, that was a very painful, on a kind of a personal level. That was a painful thing, because that was kind of one of those few things that was kind of still around, that hadn't been, plowed over and put up with condominiums.
Yeah. And I think too, when I think of the Tumors Corner area, I think it's a perfect reminder of what makes Auburn so special, because yes, again, we look towards that football stadium over there as kind of a beacon and an icon of the campus, but so much happens at the corner of College and Magnolia, not just, celebrating a football victory, but the celebration of a graduation, engagements. I know someone who got engaged there. I mean, the Tumors Corner drugstore just across the street. It's a connection of not just the university, but the university and the community, the city right there. It's what makes it so special. And I think what you said about that incident was more than just about sports. It was about hitting at the heart of who Auburn was. And I'm thankful to this day that we responded in a way that I thought was as best as you probably could have out of a very bad situation. But it still doesn't take away from the pain that someone like you especially feels when you're trying to find those connections with long lost family members and just memories of the past. So I relate to that on a huge level there.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. A lot of universities kind of have the town versus gown animosity, where the city and the locals and the university are kind of always a little bit at odds. And Auburn has never been like that. Auburn has always had a very inclusive and a very, again, familial feel between the university and the town itself, the city of Auburn. And I think the fact that, 1/4 of the downtown is the university. It is the entranceway into the university, and it's the entranceway into downtown from the university is right there in the middle of the town. And that's kind of symbolic, but it's also very practical and very real. And I think if you talk to civic leaders like current Mayor Ron Anders and others, they would tell you that that's a very important footprint for the university and for the town to maintain that relationship.
Yeah, it's one that it's uniquely Auburn, and there are probably other places that have similar feeling about areas on their campus or in their town, but I just don't think that anyone's going to come close to equating the story that resides within that simple block right there. That's so special. Let's jump ahead a little bit though in your story. I do want us to get to you actually going to Auburn, but I always like to ask this, especially for people who've lived in different parts of the United States, but also in the Southeast, and their impressions of Auburn during that time out there. You mentioned you lived in Atlanta. That's currently where I reside. Growing up in Atlanta, I know you said you weren't big sports fans in terms of following Auburn sports, but what was your impressions of Auburn living in Atlanta at that time?
It's funny. My memories my memories of Auburn were, well, living where I lived, everything was Georgia and Georgia Tech.
Figured.
Those two things just, I went to high school in the mid 80s. And so Herschel Walker was everything. I mean, Herschel Walker was the end all be all. And I remember when Bo Jackson came along, and it was like Herschel Walker 2.0. Mm-hmm. It was just this bigger, badder version of Herschel Walker. It was kind of the Auburn version, and that was kind of being in Atlanta. I didn't realize and understand the kind of the magnitude of who Bo Jackson was. I just didn't really get it. It wasn't really explained to me. It wasn't until much later that it was probably wasn't until maybe the early 90s that I really understood what an incredible individual Bo Jackson was. And then I began to kind of using that as an entrance point. That's kind of what opened up the door to me of Auburn athletics and getting to understand who Pat Dye was, and then learning more about Suge Jordan, and knowing about Hal Baird, and that was kind of the key that unlocked the door for me. And until then, I really didn't have a real understanding about Auburn, and didn't really know a whole lot about. It's kind of embarrassing, but I just had no concept of the history of Auburn. It wasn't, like I said, it just wasn't something that we followed as a family. It wasn't something I was really interested in or into. I knew some people that were Auburn fans when I was in high school, and they just knew a whole lot more about Auburn than I did. But it really wasn't until I guess I was in the Navy and about to get out of the Navy in the early 90s that Auburn as a sports culture was even a thing for me. Yeah. If that makes sense.
No, it absolutely does. And speaking of sports cultures, was there ever an opportunity that you might have stepped into another university's world? I mean, you lived in Atlanta, Georgia Tech. Was there ever a school or a fan base that almost drew you in away from Auburn?
No, the closest I would tell you is I have a lot of respect for Georgia Tech. Only because my Boy Scout troop when I was probably 13 or 14, but my Boy Scout troop one football season, our troop was responsible for raising the flag before Georgia Tech football games. And at that time, their flagpole was actually on the field. On the field. It was, in the corner of the end, like not in the end zone, but inside the fence, if you will, like on the side. A little
closer than it probably should be.
Yeah, exactly. So, and Georgia Tech was not a big player at that point, and so there was no real. It wasn't a big sacrifice to let a dozen Boy Scout kids hang out on the sidelines. But I did get to go to a number of Georgia Tech home games for 1 year, and this would probably have been like 1983, maybe 1983, 84, I'm guessing. I got to see that and really enjoyed it and had a lot of fun and learned the Georgia Tech fight song and everything because everybody sang it, the Ramblin' Wreck from Georgia Tech. And so I had that respect, but I never had first of all, I had no illusions that I would be smart enough to get into Georgia Tech.
I don't think many of us can say that. I mean, that's tough.
that's a whole other level. But yeah, I respected it, but I wouldn't what you would call a fan necessarily. I was really, to be frank, I was really more into Braves baseball in high school probably than and my high school, my high school sports. That was kind of my world at that point. So no, I really didn't think about college until I was about halfway through my stint in the Navy, and then I realized that that college was something that I wanted to do, that I needed to do, and once that decision was made, there was no other. I had zero interest in going anywhere other than Auburn.
And that's a common theme I hear from a lot of people, that it's one of those things that just clicks in your mind that this is where I'm supposed to be. I don't know why that is yet, but I know that I'm supposed to be here. And then not everybody has that feeling, and it takes a while to figure out why you ended up there and why you were meant to be there. But a lot of people have that same experience. And before we move on to that, I do want to again thank you for your service in our military. That is very much appreciated. I'm sure you hear that a lot, but I want to make sure I thank you myself here. And you deserved, after your stint there, to come to a great university like Auburn. So let's hear the story of how your time began there, and walk me through your time as an Auburn student.
Well, Auburn was great. Coming in after the Navy, I was older. I was a good 4 years. I was the age of a college senior as a freshman, and so I distinctly remember sitting in freshman English lit classes with 17 and 18-year-olds, and just at the time, it's kind of funny looking back at it. I was maybe only 3 or 4 years older, but I just felt, ancient. I felt so old compared to people in my class.
Well, you'd been through a few things, I'm sure.
It's true. No, you're not wrong. I mean, that's true. But yeah, it was, going to Auburn was, it was just this dream that I tell people often that, many times in life we have this idea or something that we build up to such a level that it could never come close to meeting our expectations. And Auburn is one of the very few things in my life that not only met but exceeded my expectations. It was everything that I had hoped and dreamed it would be on steroids. I mean, it was just, I met some of the best people. I just loved everything about it. I can't say enough good things. I lived in a small, tiny apartment off campus right across from what was the Dairy Queen and is now Byron Smokehouse. but it was the Dairy Queen when I was there, baby. It was, that's right. But yeah, I lived off of campus, and it was fantastic. I met some really good people, and the first job that I had after the Navy was at Ryan's Tavern, right across from where the Honda dealership is, and Country's Barbecue, and Ryan's Tavern, where I waited tables and bartended, and all of those people went to Auburn. And so it was just this whole community, this whole family that I was immediately welcomed into. And it was incredible. It was like I said, it was everything I'd hoped it would be and more.
You and I both spent some time along Opelika Road. I didn't live too far from where you were. Again, things probably changed a little bit between the time I was living in that vicinity and you were. But yeah, I always rode by that Byron Smokehouse, and I was like, gosh, that had to have been a Dairy Queen at some point.
Yep. Oh yeah, it was. It was definitely a Dairy Queen, without question.
Did you frequent that Dairy Queen a lot?
I remember going there, but not a ton, only because like if I was going to have dessert, I was going to Sandy Freeze because Sandy Freeze was still open, So Dairy Queen was kind of that was the low rent Sandy Freeze, that was the corporate Sandy Freeze, and we didn't do corporate. We wanted our own place. So yeah, I was if I did dessert like ice cream like that, I was either going to the Baskin Robbins downtown or the Sandy Freeze. Those were my two ice cream spots.
So living off campus, do you ever think that you missed out on something by not having that traditional dorm life? Like I obviously, like as I mentioned, I was in an apartment off campus my entire time until my last 2 years, where I might as well have been on campus because I was living above a building, taking care of the building. That was neither here nor there at this moment. So in that way, I kind of rationalized myself that I had some type of dorm experience, even though it wasn't traditional. Right. But do you feel like you ever regretted or not having that, or?
Not really. And that's only because, I just gotten out of the Navy, where I was living in very tight living conditions with, with 30 other guys. I was living in probably a 300 square foot living space with, probably 30 other guys. And so, sharing a bathroom and so no, I mean, there are experiences that some of my friends have had that they relate and I can appreciate about living in a dorm and dorm life. But, I can't say that that's something that I feel like I missed out on. I kind of got my fill of that kind of life, when I was in the Navy. So I was very happy to have my own living space.
I can imagine the smell alone of 30 men smashed together. I can.
Not pretty. It's not pretty.
I would say dorm life probably comes in the vicinity of, but nowhere near that type of situation that you were in. I'm sure that you were happy to live somewhere where you can have a little bit of we'll call it a buffer, somewhere that you can still be part of the university. But in a way, maybe that's the great thing here, is that you got to explore the community even more and kind of learn a little, like, we reference things like Byron Smokehouse, the tavern that you worked at, Opelika Road. These are some things in the community that are just like mainstays. Things around it will change, but we can remember those people, those moments, those things that we were involved in around that time while we were at college. So while you're there, what are you studying and what do you eventually graduate with?
Well, I began with radio, television, and film. That was my starting point. And then I took about almost 3 years off in the middle and moved to LaGrange because my wife at the time had gotten a job teaching in LaGrange because she'd been going to school while I was in the Navy. And so we moved to LaGrange for her teaching career. And so I kind of put a pause on my education. And then when I came back to finish my degree, we moved back to Auburn, actually rented a house in Opelika, and I commuted in because it was cheaper. And when I came back, just for a host of reasons, primarily because it was an easier major, I'm embarrassed to say, but part of it was it was an easier major. Part of it was this was now in the mid 90s, and I was a political junkie. I was just a political geek. I was watching C-SPAN all the time, and it was ridiculous. But so I decided when I came back that I would do political science, and I'd be a political science major. So that's what my actual degree is political science.
Interesting. That's quite a bit of a shift.
It's they're both in liberal arts, and that's about all you could say about them. But I loved politicals. I loved RTVF. RTVF was I had some really great classes. One really good class that has really stuck with me, and then But I loved political science. Political science was right up my alley, and really enjoyed it. It was not a particular struggle at all. The classes were, again, it was something I really enjoyed. So.
Yeah, I think that's the catch there. And no matter if it's at Auburn or at university, anywhere, you got to find what your passion is, because then it doesn't become so much of a chore. You're actually enjoying what you're being involved in, what you're learning about. And I think that's great that you found an area to get into Auburn and start out, but you kind of made some adjustments, some life adjustments, and then kind of readjusted your focus down a career path. And you're toting a degree from the greatest university in the entire world. At the end of this. So
exactly right.
That's all that matters at the end of this thing.
That's right.
Tell me about sports during your time in the 90s in Auburn. Your experiences, what's that like? Paint that picture for me.
One of the things that I remember, first of all, it was so much easier to get into a football game than it is now if you're a student. If you were a student, you could pretty much just kind of waltz in. The security was very lackadaisical, and the demand was not quite as high at the time. The other thing that I remember outside of football, one of the other things that I remember is before. So I was there before the renovation of the baseball facilities. Mm-hmm. And so I remember in the spring getting out of class and having a couple hours before I had to get to work. And I remember going and sitting on the metal bleachers, which are now part of the soccer complex. That's where those bleachers ended up. They're now at the soccer field. But I remember going and sitting on those metal bleachers and watching Auburn baseball. I don't remember a whole lot about the teams specifically. I just remember that atmosphere. I remember that you could, it would very often be like the middle of the second inning. And so they weren't worried about tickets. It's like a Thursday, Wednesday, or right. I guess like a Tuesday game or something like that. And Tuesday or Wednesday game. And it's like 3:00 in the afternoon, and you stroll in the second inning and they don't care. Nobody cared. And I would just go and sit and, eat sunflower seeds and boiled peanuts and watch 3 or 4 innings and then leave. I couldn't tell you who the players were. I couldn't tell you. I mean, I know that Coach Baird was the coach at the time. And so that's kind of my main memory until you got to the Tuberville years. And then the Tuberville years, which, I mean, I was actually in school, I guess, with Terry Bowden. And I remember my funny story about Terry Bowden is being at De Niro's downtown, which is where it's now Bourbon Street, but it used to be De Niro's. And the top 2 floors were a very nice Italian restaurant, and the bottom floor was a bar with a stage. And Terry Bowden was kind of known for frequenting some of these places. And somewhere in a stack of something in a box somewhere, I've got a paper De Niro's menu with Terry Bowden's autograph on it, because he would come and get up on stage and sing karaoke at De Niro's.
Oh my goodness.
It just like on a random Thursday, a
lot of things are happening on Thursdays in Auburn back in your time.
they really were. I'm telling you, Thursday was the day, man. Stuff was happening. But yeah, that's what I remember about sports was the whole Bowden era, and how that kind of all happened with there was all the scandal, and then there was Bowden, and Bowden was good for a while until he wasn't good anymore. And then when Tuberville came, there was a lot of questions, there was it was a little unseemly. It felt a little unseemly for a lot of Auburn fans, at least the ones that I was hanging around with, to have somebody that had been so definitive as he had about his love for his current job to then flip a switch and all of a sudden he's at Auburn. And so there was a little bit of hesitation about jumping on the Tuberville bandwagon. Of course, he beat Alabama and Georgia, and all that went away, and we loved him immediately. It really didn't take long at all. So that was kind of my memory. When I was in school, Stan White was the quarterback. He and I had classes together, and for the first part that I was in school. And then when I came back, gosh, I'm trying to remember who was. That would have been like
Ben Leard. Would that sound about right? No.
Yeah, 90. So like 97, 98, 98. Yeah. I'm trying to remember because I remember the whole Ben Leard, Gabe Gross thing was that was a big shocker because Gabe Gross was kind of the heir apparent and he was going to be the guy, and then he was like, "Nope, baseball," and everybody went, "What?" It's like, "Yep, I'm baseball. Y'all have fun." And
well, it worked out for him.
It worked out really well for him. So yeah, I remember that, and then later, after I was no longer a student, then it was. I think everybody kind of has like the quarterback that they identify with the most,
Mm-hmm.
and for me, it was my love for Auburn football really solidified with Jason Campbell.
Mm-hmm.
It was really the Jason Campbell era. And that's now we're getting into the 2000s. So I'd been out of school I graduated in 98. So I'd been out of school for, 5 or 6 years, when at least 4 or 5 years when Jason kind of came into his own, but I was always a huge Jason Campbell fan. And to this day, I'm just not only as a quarterback, but as just a tremendous man. So there are a couple of years in there when I wasn't in school and was focused on trying to just grind for a paycheck, and sports kind of took a back seat. And then it wasn't really until I came back and got into radio that Auburn sports took on kind of the importance in my life that it did.
And I think that's where this needs to head, is you and Jeremy Henderson eventually coming together and working in radio together. And so how does that come about? And, who got the better end of the deal on that one?
Well, I can promise you I got the better end of the deal because I got to hang out with Jeremy Henderson, and he's brilliant and hysterical, and I'm just a schmuck that tells stupid jokes. But Jeremy Henderson is, without qualification, one of the most brilliant people I've ever met in my life. The man is just incredibly, incredibly smart. Genius level intelligence, wicked sense of humor, really fast, very subtle, one of the most talented writers you'll ever meet. I count it an eternal blessing that I can call him a friend and former coworker. That whole thing, the genesis of all that really began with me working with Andy Burcham as I was a board operator, studio engineer for Andy Burcham and Bill Cameron on Sports Call. And this would have been 2002, I guess, 2001, I guess this would have been 2002, September, like fall of 2002. And so Andy and Bill and I worked together in radio. They had Sports Call, and I was the I was the producer, I guess you would call it, the studio engineer. And I did that for a number of years. And then Andy moved to a different station and to a different group. And after a couple of years, I was able to kind of follow behind him to the same station and the same group. And he's always kind of been a mentor of mine. And so when I got hired by the Auburn Network Incorporated on ESPN 106.7, it was to start a 2-hour sports call-in show, which was something I'd never done before. I had no history in it at all, other than being a producer of a show like that, but I'd never actually done it. I felt totally, what's the right word? Well, I just didn't feel like I had the breadth and the depth of knowledge to be able to carry a show like that. And fortunately, my co-host, Ron Anders, who had been a cheerleader at Auburn and has lived in Auburn his entire life and can tell you who played fullback in 1978.
Wow.
And the third game of the season and who we played and what the final score. He just has that encyclopedic kind of Wikipedia mind. He can tell you all of those things. He just remembers all of it. And so he was my co-host, but we had, because of his job, we had basically 1 hour a week where he couldn't be on the show. He wasn't a full-time employee of the station. I was a full-time employee. He had his own full-time gig, and he would come in the afternoon and do the show with me. Well, there was 1 hour a week that he couldn't be there, and I can't remember what it was. It had something to do with his job. And so for a little while, I would just cover, and I would just fill by myself, which you can imagine the train wreck that was.
I wouldn't imagine it's a train wreck. The anxiety is filling me right now trying to picture how you manage that.
Sure. Well, I mean, you've done a podcast, you've been doing these podcasts, so you know how important it is to have somebody to bounce things off of. And, I've done, good Lord, I remember doing a show where we lost all of our automation system. And so we basically, if we turned the microphones off, it was dead air. And so we couldn't take phone calls, and I was by myself. And so I talked for 2 hours. It was insane. It was just insane. It was probably the worst 2 hours in the history of, Marconi should have sued me for being on the radio like that.
Hey, Auburn fans, I want to take a quick timeout from this episode to bring your attention to something very special. Here at the E2C Network, we pride ourselves on bringing you the best content for Auburn fans out there. And best of all, it's free to you. But just because it's free doesn't mean there aren't costs, especially when you have a library of hundreds of podcasts, videos, blogs, and more. Many of you have reached out and asked how you can support this network in the past. Well, now I have your answer. It's called the E2C Network Booster Club over at patreon.com/E2C Network. There you'll find a membership monthly reward system where you can sign up for as little as $1 and get different perks at different tiers. Some of those perks include things such as apparel, eligibility to join us on future podcasts, recognition as an E2C Network booster, exclusive communications, and bonus content that is available nowhere else. If you love this network and want to help us keep producing podcasts like this one, please head on over to patreon.com/E2C Network to join the E2C Network Booster Club. You can also get there by going to our website, e2cnetwork.com/support. Whether you decide to join or not, we are still so appreciative that you would support us by just listening and being here, because each and every one of you is part of our E2C Network family. Well, that's it. Timeout's over. Let's get back into the episode.
We had this 1 hour where my co-host couldn't be there, but he somehow knew we had Jeremy in as a guest for one particular topic, and I can't remember what it was. But Jeremy had come in to do one 15-minute segment, and I'd never met him before. And immediately he and I got along just fantastic. And that 15-minute segment turned into 2 segments. So he was on for a total of 30 minutes. It was basically, hey, can you stay through the break? He's like, yeah, I can stay through the break. So that turned into 30 minutes. And then I was like, hey, man, I'd love to have you back sometime. He's like, yeah, whatever, sure, whenever you want to have me or whatever. And so I had him back a couple of weeks later to talk about something else. And then I realized that I was going to have this 1 hour a week that was going to be vacant. It was going to be open, that I was going to be by myself. And so I went to Jeremy and said, hey, it would be fun if you and I just hung out, and let's make it a segment. We'll make it a 1 hour segment once a week, and we'll make it a thing. And whatever kind of crazy ideas, because he was putting all this stuff out on the War Eagle Reader that was just this incredible stuff. And a lot of my, I'll be honest with you, Kyle, a lot of my Auburn knowledge and education, a ton of that came from reading the War Eagle Reader. He just had so much history that had been meticulously researched. And he was so entertaining in his writing style, and he knew so much, and just had such a great attitude. I mean, he's just so wickedly funny. And so he and I just really hit it off. And so we came up with this segment called It's Pronounced Jordan. And It's Pronounced Jordan, which is, we stole that name, or I stole that name from one of his T-shirt designs, because he had the War Eagle Reader had come up with a T-shirt that says It's Pronounced Jordan, which is ironic, but spelled Jordan, but it's pronounced Jordan. So we came up with this idea that we would have this 1 hour a week called It's Pronounced Jordan, and that turned into 1 day a week. So we had one whole day for 2 hours. It was Jeremy and I, and then we did that for probably, maybe 2.5, 3 years. And ownership and management of the station that we were at came to us and said, we'd like to have a morning show on our FM classic hit station, and we would like for you guys to basically take what you have with It's Pronounced Jordan and kind of translate that into a morning drive show. And so that's how Rich and Jeremy happened.
And how many years did you two stay together doing that?
Rich and Jeremy was 4.5 years.
Okay.
I think that's right. 4.5 years. And I'm, like I said, I consider it a profound blessing to call him a friend. And you spend 4 hours first thing in the morning with somebody. Your defenses are down. You you see people at their most raw, and before all the coffee is kicked in, and before you've had breakfast, and you're tired, and you're dealing with family issues and life and all of that stuff, and because of that, we got to be very, very close, and I just consider him one of my best friends. He's just a tremendous guy.
I can only imagine the conversations that happened when you guys weren't on the air in the mornings.
Oh, yeah. We used to joke that if we could have like a premium channel for subscribers only, that you got to listen to when the microphones were off. We joked that we would make $1 gazillion and then be immediately kicked off the air. That's how that would happen.
That's how I figured that might go. But hey, it would have been successful for that short stint it was there.
it would have been fun, that's for sure. But yeah, we had so much fun. So much fun.
And I got to imagine one of the highlights of your time together, besides just the many mornings that you spent together, just going off about everything in sports in Auburn, was when a certain lady from the British Isles decided to surprise you guys live on the
Oh
air.
yeah,
That,
yeah.
I think a lot of us knew I actually knew that was coming, and I was interested to see what the reaction was going to be that day.
Shock.
Yes.
Shock was the yeah. We never saw that coming at all. Neither one of us saw
So
that coming.
what we're referencing for listeners, if we haven't said it already, is Dee Ford came on I think it was her first pilgrimage to Auburn, and or was it the second one? I can't remember.
I can't remember if it was her first or her second now that she surprised us. I want to say that she had been there before, briefly, and I don't know that I don't think I'd gotten to meet her. If she'd been there before, I hadn't met her, I don't think. But we had initially, of course, Jeremy is just king of this kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So when he found out that there was, he was the one that kind of led with this whole story and broke this whole story about this woman that had, a very similar Twitter handle to Dee Ford, the Auburn football player. He jumped right on that,
Mm-hmm.
and it was really, I really attribute a lot of what happened with Jay Jacobs reaching out to D and all of that. I attribute a lot of that to Jeremy really kind of taking that ball and running with it and making it a thing that was well known. And so we had her. I think we Skyped her in onto the show a couple of times, just almost as just like a gimmick. Wasn't this funny? What do are you having tea right now with crumpets? Are you gonna play some soccer? Are you gonna, like all this stereotypical, but Dee is so great. She totally bought into the culture, and we quickly realized. It's interesting. Very often, and I'm sure you've seen this, Kyle. Very often, we all think that Auburn is a very special place, made up of very special people. But we also kind of realize that we're biased and we live in a bubble and all of that. And so when you see that those things kind of affirmed by people who are as totally disconnected from our culture as Dee Ford is,
Mm-hmm.
but she picked up on the Auburn family and she understood intuitively kind of who we were as a people,
Mm-hmm.
and was totally drawn into that. And that's affirming, for us Auburn fans and for us Auburn people, for the Auburn family. It kind of affirms what we know and believe, but to see other people get that is very affirming. So yeah, we had her on the show a couple of times. We had talked to her, we'd Skyped her in on the program, and I think she had been in once for something. But yeah, when she came in and surprised us in the studio, neither one of us had any idea at all that she was coming. And it was, I think I've only been surprised, legitimately surprised on the air, like live on the air twice. That was one of them. And then the other one was when my sister showed up for my 50th birthday. Like those are the only two times that I've ever been completely 100% surprised on the air. Like never saw that coming at all. Very bizarre to have Todd Van Amp stick his camera in the door and start taking pictures, and you're like, why are you taking pictures? And then you see there's somebody behind him. You're like, who is that behind? Why are the what? Who? Holy crap! Yeah. So that was a lot of fun.
And I think the cool thing about Dee Ford's story, and you touched on a lot of those elements there, is that it's so unique, but so Auburn at the same time, because we talk about the Auburn family. We use this big term of family out there, and it
Right.
feels like that's something that anybody can use, but you don't know what it means unless you actually, and this is really redundant, but you know what it means. And D knows what that means. And the phrase that I've been using it since we've been doing this podcast series, and kind of, I think it speaks to what you and I are kind of touching on here, is, Auburn actually isn't a place. Auburn is a people. And I think the true testament to that is D Ford, because who in their wildest dreams thinks that Auburn reaches out to the British Isles and draws in many people? I'm sure they're out there. I know of a few, but to that level, and makes her take I keep using the phrase pilgrimage to Auburn as often as she possibly can. It's a story that's uniquely Auburn. I don't think happens in any other university or any other fan base.
Well, I've often said that when you look at the difference between Auburn and other schools, especially other big state schools, like that other school on the other end of the state, or Ohio State, or University of Michigan, or any of the big schools that have the name of their state in their school name, you don't end up at Auburn by accident. Auburn isn't a default. It's not a fallback. Auburn is a decision. Like, that's something that you're drawn to, and you come there because it calls to you for some reason. It connects with you for some reason. It's not, well, I don't know where else I'm going to go. I grew up in Georgia. I've got the, Hope Scholarship, so I guess I'll go to Georgia. It's not like that. You don't just show up. You don't just end up at Auburn. You go to Auburn because it's a very intentional decision. And that, I think, breeds a certain type of mentality and a certain type of culture. And I think that's what people see. I think that's what kind of makes the Auburn family, because we all have experienced that on some level, and that separates us from so many other universities and so many other cultures. And so I think people like D, who have not experienced that for whatever reason in their own lives, see that, and it's attractive. That's something that's attractive. And that's something that I think a lot of people want to be a part of, and she's a testament to that.
And I think if I can tie that back even into your story of you talking about that, something that just draws you to it, that it's not a default. So there has to be a reason that you connect with it on some level. And we trace this back through your story to your dad. And though you may have lost him at such a young age, there was something about these pictures that he took, these stories that you may have known about him during this time that he was there. You wanted to investigate it, and it starts the wave, the cycle of things that you eventually find your way. Even though you go up to Atlanta, you may have had a little bit of a flirtation with some Georgia schools just for a moment.
A dalliance.
But somehow, some way, you end up in the orange and blue. Here you are at the current place. And just maybe briefly, can you give us like where you are now in your life and your fandom? And then I want to give you a chance to answer the not so rapid fire questions.
I guess about almost exactly a year ago, I retired from radio and have answered a call to enter seminary. So I'm currently in seminary right now to become a Catholic priest. And I've got, I just finished my first year, which was a bit of a culture shock, but I've got 5 more years to go, and good Lord willing, and my Archbishop, and not necessarily in that order, as the Archbishop is quick to remind me, I will be ordained as a Catholic priest in the Archdiocese of Mobile, of which Auburn is a part. Auburn is the I like to call it the northernmost outpost of the Archdiocese of Mobile. The Archdiocese of Mobile is a southern 28 counties, and it kind of runs a line from Mobile. I mean, from Auburn over to Selma, and so that's kind of where I am. And I will tell you, there are probably a good 5 or 6 guys in my seminary that are huge Auburn fans. Last year, we just had the most unbelievable time during March Madness, and watching all that happen. And of course, we got robbed of it this year, but last football season was fantastic. There are a couple of Alabama guys in the school too, so it's always nice, when
Say a few extra prayers for them,
Yeah, what's fun is that things like sports fandom doesn't go away. It maybe takes on a different level of import or relevance, but it's good-natured distraction, and we have our little competitive fan bases going. So
I can only imagine just such an even closer knit community there that I'm sure in part of right now. The one-upmanship is probably on a different level. It's more. Is it more subtle, or is it just more deadly?
It's sometimes both. Sometimes both. I'm not gonna lie. Sometimes it can be moments of grace, and sometimes it's moments to ask for forgiveness. It just depends on how you let your emotions get to you.
Yeah, you can take the student out of the college, but you can't take college out of the student sometimes.
No. Hey, listen, Auburn is always there. Auburn is always there.
All right. Well, I think that's a great place here to kind of begin our wrap up. And we always like to do this with our guests, not so rapid fire questions. I changed it because I think actually Jeremy made me change this because he wanted to explain each one of his answers and why he did it, which I loved every bit of it. And so that's why I've altered
Of course
this.
He changed it. Of course he changed it.
Yeah, it was.
That makes perfect sense.
He is a trailblazer in many fashions. I just didn't think he'd be trailblazing on my podcast, but here you are. All right. Well, if you're ready, we'll get started with it.
All right.
These are 12 questions, and feel free to explain yourself if you need to. But question number 1: orange or blue?
Blue.
Any reason why?
It goes with more things.
It's a very simple answer, but it's a very true answer, and I love it. Not anybody's given that type of answer for the colors yet, and so I always like to ask.
It goes with more things. Yep.
Question number 2: Aubie or War Eagle?
Ooh, Aubie. Now, I love War Eagle. Don't get me wrong. The Eagle is unbelievable. It's incredible. But I will never be too old to be enthralled and thrilled by how cool and awesome Aubie is.
What is it about Aubie? Everyone says that.
I don't know. Aubie is just cool. And I know it's kind of nerdy and geeky or whatever, but he's still just freaking cool. And I know all the stories about, the fact that there's like 3 Aubies in any given season. Spoiler alert. But
wait, what?
Exactly. Can I give you a quick sidebar? This is me explaining all right, quick sidebar. I'm at the baseball facilities. I'm up in the press box at the baseball field, and these 2 guys they get off the elevator. I'm going down to get a hot dog. Actually, I'm going down to get a hot dog for Rod Bramblett, and the elevator opens. These 2 guys come out, and one of them's carrying a big duffel bag. They walk out of the elevator, across the hall, directly into a bathroom. Now it's a one-holer. It's a 1-stall bathroom.
Mm-hmm.
So they both go in and shut the door. I get in the elevator. The door's closed. I don't really think a whole lot about it. I go down. I get the hot dogs. I come back up. The elevator door opens just as the bathroom door opens, and one guy and Aubie step out. And it was like seeing Clark Kent walk into the phone booth and Superman come out. I felt like, are they going to kill me now? Am I going to end up getting shivved because I know the secret that one of those 2 guys was Aubie? I don't know what it is. Aubie's just cool. I mean, the kids love him. Chicks dig him. Guys totally, have fun with him. So I'm Aubie. Team Auburn.
The Minions of Albi is a real group. I've said that, and many people who have been on this show have chosen War Eagle, and I commend their bravery, but they are on the hit list for the Minions of Albi, and you are not on that, so there you are.
Excellent.
Question number 3. This is I got to figure out a way to rephrase this one, but I'm going to ask it anyway. I think there's only one answer. Auburn fight song or Glory, Glory to All Auburn?
Oh, fight song.
I keep hoping someone's going to choose Glory, Glory to All Auburn for me, but it's hard to beat that fight song.
Yeah, well, it's the only time that it was the first time I could curse in front of my parents and not get in trouble. I mean, that's it. It's as simple as that, Kyle.
You are absolutely right.
I mean, that's it. That's literally what it was. It was the first time I could legitimately curse in front of my parents and not get in trouble.
And
conversely, the first time that I allowed my child to curse in front of me without him getting in trouble. So,
you get one thing, and that's it.
That's it.
Question number 4: your favorite Auburn athletics program?
Oh gosh, that's so hard.
Mm-hmm.
That's so hard because, as Pat Dye so eloquently put it, Alabama fans love Alabama football, and Auburn fans love Auburn. Oh gosh. Well, if you want to look at just pure excellence and dominance, it's hard to go anywhere other than Greg Williams and Auburn Equestrian.
Amen.
I mean, you want to just talk about pure dominance. Started from scratch with nothing and has become I've lost track of how many national championships they've won in a row.
Whatever it is, they're down one because they should be have another one if it wasn't for coronavirus.
It's exactly right. They've got 11 bajillion of them. So I'm a big fan of that. The big three are I always enjoy the big three. But for excellence, for entertainment value, for bang for your buck, equestrian and gymnastics are probably 2 of my favorites. Plus, those 2 coaches I know better than most of the other coaches, and I just have so much respect for both of those men as just as men. So,
they're very, very accessible people from what I personally experienced, and it's very nice to have that. But if I had to push you though to make one of them upset, who would you choose?
Oh, I'd go equestrian.
Equestrian, okay.
I'd go equestrian. Yeah.
Okay. Well, then question number 5 would be your favorite Auburn athlete. It's only going to get harder.
Oh man, it's only going to get harder.
I think Jeremy was ready to just run out of here by the time he got done with this.
Yeah. We mentioned him earlier. I have so much respect for Gabe Gross. Gabe Gross is just Jason Campbell might be a very close second.
Mm-hmm.
The Auburn has such a rich history of just really amazing athletes, both men and women. But part of it's just because I've gotten to know Gabe a little bit professionally and personally, and just the person that he is, the family man that he is, the man of faith that he is, the consummate professional. He's very humble. Here's a guy that really could do just about anything in the world, and he called high school football for 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
And he did it because he wanted to get better at broadcasting, and he wanted to kind of pay his dues in broadcasting. And so he called high school football for 2 years, and it paid off. And he would come to little schmucks like me and after a broadcast and say, hey, I want your input. Tell me what I'm doing right. Tell me what you think I need to change. He's just awesome. Very humble, hardworking, salt of the earth guy, an Auburn man through and through. And that's the biggest compliment I can give him.
That's a great selection, not one that we've had yet. And I'm so happy that you've had that connection there. And he's one that's really resonated with you. Question 6, though, your favorite Auburn coach.
Oh, wow. Living?
Any Auburn coach.
Oh boy. Got a lot of respect for Donahue. It's hard to pick. Well, no, all right. I was going to go Shug Jordan because he's a decorated World War II veteran that defeated the Nazi on the beaches of Normandy. And it's hard to go against that. But I will tell you this. It probably comes down between Sonny Smith and Hal Baird. Two of the most genuine, amazing, not only just good men, great coaches, very generous people. I just have so much respect for both of them. It's hard for me to separate. I'd probably, if a gun was stuck to my head, I'd probably, I'd apologize to Sonny Smith and pick Hal Baird. Is probably what I would do.
Those are two very good choices because, the thing that sticks out to me is the way that his former athletes speak of Hal Baird. And I think you could say that for a lot of coaches. But
I agree.
I think that speaks to how special he is as a coach. And same thing for Sonny Smith. The way that Charles, I interviewed Sonny's daughter in a previous episode, and the way their family speaks about Charles and the way Charles speaks about them and the relationship they have, I think speaks to that, why they're so important, not just to Auburn, but to their players.
Yeah, agree.
Question 7, your favorite non-athletics Auburn person. So just a little bit of clarification here. This can be like a celebrity. It can be a family member. Anyone that is not a coach, an athlete, somehow related directly to sports. Who's your favorite Auburn person?
Wow.
It's a tough one too. I told you it was going to get harder.
Yeah. Favorite Auburn person. Wow. That's really, really tough.
I mean, it's when you open up outside of athletics, it just, the spectrum gets so wide, and then it's how do you hone down to that?
Yeah, exactly. All right. I'm going to give you this is going to be bending the rules, but I'm going to call privilege and bend the rules a little bit.
I can deal with that.
I'm going to give you a category. And I say this because I brag about this all the time. I don't know if it's still true, but at the height of the space race, there were more Auburn graduates involved in the NASA lunar program to land a man on the moon than any other single university. So from astronaut to engineer, from working at NASA to working at one of the suppliers like McDonnell Douglas or some of these other companies that provided computers or rocket boosters or whatever. There were more Auburn graduates involved in the space race than any other single university. And I've always taken great pride in that. Ken Mattingly is kind of the poster child for that because he was an astronaut. But there are hundreds of engineers that graduated from Auburn that were heavily involved in putting man on the moon and beyond into the shuttle and the space station and all of that. And so those are some of the men and women that I take the most pride in when I think about Auburn people that are not affiliated with sports.
It's one thing to talk about how revered Auburn engineers are in general and that type of student that comes out of Auburn. But when you talk about the space program and the significant impact that they've had on them, it's hard to really ignore that. It's huge. Incredible. Absolutely incredible. So I will accept your point of privilege and allow that.
Thank you. Thank you.
Question 8, your favorite Auburn building.
I've spent almost all of my academic career in Haley Center and hated it, so I'm going to scratch that one.
Some people to this day are still lost in there.
Oh, it's just horrific. It's so bad. That one and Parker are just so bad. Oh, they're just terrible. Let's see, my favorite. Oh gosh, what's the right next to Sanford is the small little auditorium building.
Langdon Hall.
That's got the seal right in front of it. I've got a soft spot in my heart for Langdon, only because they used to show free movies in there 100 years ago. They would show free movies like it was probably a Thursday.
Right.
But they would.
Of course, everything was during that time.
Everything was Thursday. But they would show free movies once a week, and I got to announce the movies a couple of times, and so I don't know. For some reason, I just kind of got a bit of a soft spot for Langdon Hall. I know it's kind of a nondescript, whatever building, but for some reason, I've always liked it.
I think you'd be surprised how many people agree with you and how many people have never stepped foot in it and it still means something to them. Because
it's interesting.
Again, it's uniquely Auburn, and there's something about that particular area that gets overlooked sometimes by Sanford Hall.
Yeah, it's true.
Number 9, your favorite Auburn place to eat.
Oof. I mean, it's hard not to go Niffers because it's so uniquely Auburn. And they've got everything.
I'm hungry right now just thinking about their menu.
I know it. Who couldn't go for a big old turkey, whatever?
Stop it. Stop it right now.
I just want a fishbowl right now. That's all I want. The Niffers just brings back so many memories. The original Mama Goldberg's, right there on campus, obviously was huge back in the day. I have to tell you, I mean, I know it's not indigenous to Auburn, although it was the first one outside of Atlanta. I'm just a huge Mellow Mushroom fan, and that Mellow Mushroom feels unique to Auburn, even though you can go to Mellow Mushrooms all over the country now. For some reason, that one, it doesn't feel like it feels like it's a local place. It doesn't feel like it's part of a chain.
Absolutely.
So I've kind of got a spot for that. But if I had to pick one place, God, Niffers just has a menu that doesn't quit. It's just, the menu is just monstrous. So I'd probably go Niffers.
How they maintain that, I have no clue. But whatever they're doing, you just keep trucking on Niffers, and I don't know.
Keeley's had the same size kitchen in that place for like 25 years. I have no idea how they keep pumping out more and more stuff. It's unbelievable.
Just keep doing that thing you're doing, and we'll keep coming.
Exactly. More tater tots.
And more corn nuggets. That's what I want right now.
Yes.
Number 10, your favorite Auburn tradition. This can be sports or non-sports. It can be a personally obscure tradition you had at Auburn, but your favorite Auburn tradition.
Favorite Auburn tradition. Gosh. I'm gonna lump two in on the same thing. I love Tiger Walk, and I love the Eagle Flight. Even though the Eagle Flight is people forget the Eagle Flight's relatively new.
But it feels like it's been here forever.
It feels like it's been here forever. It's in the history of Auburn football, it's relatively new. But the Tiger Walk is just, when you look at all these other schools that do it now, and you realize that Auburn started that. Like, that's uniquely Auburn, that everybody else has co-opted because it's so cool. I think there are a lot of things that are kind of like that from Auburn. But I just love the idea that we're going to line the streets with 50,000 people, and the entire team and the cheerleaders are going to walk right through the middle of them and get high-fived and shake hands and get pumped up. And what's interesting, when you talk to Auburn football players, they'll tell you that that's one of their favorite aspects of game day, is going through Tiger Walk and how much that means to them. I think Tiger Walk is probably one of my favorites.
is, I've always wondered what it'd be like to see it from their perspective, because it's awesome just seeing it from a fan's perspective. But I can't even imagine what it is like literally walking through a sea of orange and blue, and not one that parts very well either, because they will get up and close just to hug you and slap five and everything. And
it's a group of people that want nothing more than for you to succeed at your highest. And that's a powerful thing. It's a powerful thing.
Might be why we're so successful.
That's right. That's right.
All right, we're rounding it out here. Question number 11, your favorite Auburn memory. You think of Auburn when you think of this memory.
Oh, gosh. My favorite Auburn memory, Kyle, I've got so many.
Mm-hmm.
This is obscurely personal, but
it's the ones I love.
There was a season that for baseball that my job with the Auburn Sports Network was to assist with the home games in getting some of the technical stuff set up for the radio broadcast for Auburn home games for baseball. And so I got to sit in the broadcast booth at the baseball field with Rod Bramlett and Andy Burcham, and just watching those two professionals who had been partners for so long. They were such good friends, had such a deep respect for each other and love for each other, and they were such pros. I mean, it was just seamless. Every single thing they did was just seamless. And to be on some small level allowed access into that little space, that very, even though you're broadcasting on the radio, inside that booth is a very intimate space. And to be welcomed into that, and I'll never forget, Rod, leaving to go down to get a hot dog, and he brought me back an extra bag of chips because he knew I liked chips, and I felt like I had arrived. I felt like I was just, I don't know, that will always be a very, very special memory to me, to have been fortunate enough and blessed enough to be just a small little part of that kind of magical time in Auburn broadcast history.
And what an awesome memory for you to have now, especially after his passing. And obviously Andy is still here, and he is just as much the professional and just as much the awesome person. But
having dinner with him tomorrow night.
Oh, well, look at you.
He's my mentor. He really is. He's been my mentor in radio, and a very dear friend I love very much.
Well, we at him on Twitter all the time, telling him what a great job he's doing. Just tell him that we are very pleased with what he has done in such a very unfortunate circumstances. Yeah. Not a job I would have wanted.
No, he has really risen to the challenge, not only professionally but personally with all that Rod's passing, Rod and Paula's passing has entailed. And so just really proud of Andy and his wife Jan, and how they've handled the whole situation.
Big shoes to fill, but if anybody was equipped, it was Andy. So very happy. All right, your final one. Describe Auburn in one word. There's nothing wrong with the obvious answer there, but
family.
There's nothing wrong with it.
Family is the obvious. Family is the obvious answer. The reason that family works so well is that family is not nirvana. Family is not heaven. Family is not perfect. Family is flawed and oftentimes broken and sometimes at odds with each other. But family is, at the end of the day, foundational and whole and unbreakable. And I think it's unique. Each family is unique. And so, I would choose that word because it is appropriate for who Auburn is as a people and a culture.
And I always ask people to explain if they use the family for that answer why, and I think you summed that up beautifully there. It's not a perfect union, but it is a union that cannot be undone and should not be
exactly
undone. And that's what makes us so special as individuals, but even more so as a unit. And that's why I maintain that we are not a place as Auburn, but we are a people.
Agreed.
So thank you so much, Rich, for spending some time with us here to tell about your Auburn roots. And I know we probably skipped over a ton of it, but I feel like we've gotten a great grasp of who you are as an Auburn man. And I am thankful to have you as part of our Auburn family.
Kyle, I appreciate it. Likewise, this has been a lot of fun. I hope you have something that you can use.
We have plenty, and I'm sure that Jeremy and Dee will very much enjoy the shout outs that you gave them here as well.
Both good, lovely people. So,
all right, War Eagle Rich, and thank you for joining us.
War Eagle, Kyle.